one of the first things people will say is, yeah, but I burn easily. Or yeah, what about skin cancer? And so one of our charts shows 0.3% of all cancers is melanoma. 0.3% of all cancer is melanoma.
Just a bunch of hype.
Sunlight, we know from these studies, can cure 70% of cancers.
Wow.
So weigh those two options. 0.3% is melanoma, or you cure 70% of cancers with sunlight.
This is Spirit Gym. Today, Paul welcomes back Kyle Kingsbury to his podcast. Kyle is a retired MMA fighter and the host of the Kyle Kingsbury podcast. He is also a first-generational farmer at Gardeners of Eden, a non-profit regenerative farm in Texas. Thank you for listening to this podcast, which would not be possible without you, our subscribers, and also our premier sponsors, Organifi, Bioptimizers, Paleo Valley, and Wild Pastures. The sponsors' special offers and discounts are mentioned in this episode, or you can visit the show notes page at paulchek.com/podcast. Today, Paul and Kyle are talking about the Wisdom Keepers.
Okay, everybody. Today, we're talking with my best buddy, Kyle Kingsbury. And I thought you guys, if you don't know about Kyle's podcast, Kyle, is it still called the Kyle Kingsbury, or how do you title it?
Yep, that's it. Kyle Kingsbury podcast.
Highly recommend. He interviews a lot of fantastic people. In fact, he's one of the guys I go to get people to interview for my podcast. So, Kyle, it's lovely to have you back, baby.
It's good to be back. It's great to be back.
It was great to come visit you guys and see just all the beauty you've created there. It was stunning. I loved your house and the property and seeing your kids, and just the whole place was so alive and beautiful.
Yeah, it was an absolute treat having you guys out here. And, I always feel bad anytime I get to come visit you without my family, just because I know how much Toss misses you. And the kids are coming up in age, so I know they'd remember each other now at this point. So looking forward to that. But it was great having you out here on the land, showing you everything we've been putting our heart and soul into.
Yeah, the house was just awesome. I really loved the layout of it, the high ceilings and all the art. And it's just great to see your art has evolved so much. And, Natasha's is always stunning. There's never any question about that. It was just such a great environment. What do you think's happened inside of you and the family now that you've got more space and you're out where you can breathe a little bit and away from so much of the buzz of the city?
Well, there's a few things there, because I certainly I could feel the shift, like almost like one of my bucket list items for my life has been checked. And I've wanted to have land. I've thought about having land and things like that as a vacation home. But when I was a city boy, I was a city boy. And then, 2020 happened and I was like, this isn't an end of the road thing. This is a right now thing. I need to get the hell out. As that became a reality, when we were building here, we were working on the farm for probably a year and a half, 2 years prior to the house getting built. And so we get to really imprint on the land and have the land imprint on us. And I'd walk through, I remember we did our foundation, and I just walked through every room in the house when it was just a slab and really try to picture what this would look like. And it's almost like a weight that I didn't know I had on was lifted. I didn't feel any constriction when I was in the city, but now that I'm here, it's like that's gone. And it's like, damn, I lived with that. It's like wearing a 10-pound weight vest and you never realized it was there. And then it just vanishes one day. It's so peaceful. It's so beautiful. Every morning I start the day with a morning walk. Two of our Pyrenees dogs had a litter, and we've had a hard time moving the dogs. So we're like, we can keep them. They're great livestock guardians. We'll keep them from now until we can find good homes for them and be really selective with that. But we want to walk these dogs every day to make sure they're getting good exercise. And so I'll take 5 dogs and our little Chihuahua Shih Tzu Guapo. 6 dogs will go out on a walk each morning for 2.5 miles, and we'll run into red deer. We'll run into the red stag. We'll run into the black buck. We'll see wild turkeys on the land, whitetail. We'll see our sheep. It's such a impressive and beautiful place. Red-tailed hawks, red shoulder hawks, cara, the Mexican eagle. Just so many beautiful things I'd never see in the city. That's our backyard now. It's remarkable. It's a really big feeling to have. And as you spoke to it too, the spaciousness of the house, we didn't have, in my opinion, it wasn't a small house in Austin, but also knowing our family would grow and how many people we'd like to have over. And my sister's got a huge family. She's a mother of 4. So anytime she wants to come to town, I don't want her to have to pay for an Airbnb. I'd love for her and the kids to stay here. So we've doubled the size. and we're close to about 6,000 square feet. And you can really feel that, like we use every inch of this space. Our garage is a dojo, as you saw. And that's really the dance studio for the kids. They'll have me turn on the music and they go running around on the mats, dancing and being wild and crazy. So it's been a dream come true getting to make this place manifest.
Yeah, it's when I was in your house, it didn't feel big and it didn't feel small, but it felt like you guys had beautifully used all the space. And it reminds me of when we moved into our house, because we were living in a 2,400 square foot house, and our main house here is 6,800 square feet. And when we were looking at it and buying it and all that, we were thinking, what are we going to do with all this space, And then when we actually moved in, we realized, oh my God, we have got so much stuff because we converged Angie's house, our Vista house, and the Heaven house. And that was 3 gyms as well. So we got stuck with mountains of stuff we had to figure out how to give away or get rid of. And now the house feels like where we need more space. And it's hard for me to imagine. But as you know, when you got kids and, our businesses all run out of here, the house is very busy all the time. So it's not, you don't realize how you like move into a space and it all gets used up very quickly.
Yeah, moving is a great time to get rid of stuff. That's something, we'll watch like a show like Hoarders, and it's like, oh, we got to get rid of everything, and then we'll just clean out the closet and clean out stuff. But yeah, to your point, I mean, when you have kids, that space goes very quickly. And it's nice having spaces for the kids that are dedicated for their play, and the art room and the kids, kids education room and things like that. I think that we put a lot of use in those spaces, and it makes it does fill in quickly. And it's nice to have that as a parent, to have a little extra space for sure.
One of the things that I feel, and I'm sure you'll agree, but I'd love to hear your words on this, is there's something inside of me being here, particularly when you have your own water and you have enough food that you can make it through an emergency situation, no matter how the world goes crazy or whatever it does, or another, God forbid, pandemic kind of bullshit. There's something inside of you that feels much more stable, and you feel there's just a sense of connection that is hard to put words to. But do you feel that when you have that stability in your life?
Yeah, it's a funny thing. For a while there, even before 2020, because of my fight career, I really wanted to do away with fear, as if that was a possibility, right? And so I had the intention of living without fear completely, and not really understanding it either. So my intention in 2020, even prior to COVID, was to live without fear, and I hadn't really given fear its due respect. I had only seen fear as problematic. Like if you're listening to a guy like Bruce Lee, never fight with fear, never fight angry. That actually makes a lot of sense. And there was quite a few times where fear got the best of me, either before or during a fight, and that fight didn't go the way that I wanted it to. And I could see that there was trickles of that still in my day to day, even though I didn't have somebody throwing a punch at my face, that I very much still had things that I feared. And 2020 was the antithesis. It was the absolute ice on all cake fear-wise for me. And just understanding as a provider and a father and a protector, I didn't have my ducks in a row. I used to kind of chuckle at right-wing, prepper types. And then when 2020 happened, I realized we're not in a position, if anything goes south, it's 72 hours to anarchy, right? To total. You don't have food or water or electricity for 72 hours, it's game on. It's a world without rule of law, right? And that world without rule of law is anything goes. And so really understanding that, what was at stake, and being a father and a protector and a provider, that became pretty much my mission, was to be able to have the ability to grow our own food. And also on the positive, that might be staying on the negative side, but the positive side of this is that I'd started getting into regenerative agriculture since the first time I watched you in the Flatten Your Abs Forever video. You were wearing the I Love Dirt shirt and talking about the microbiome of us and the microbiome of the earth, and way ahead, long before a lot of other people were. And that just really tuned me into that. And I very much ever since been glued to that. And it just made sense for us. Like, we love this. We vote with our dollar for this. Why not participate in that? Why not participate in permaculture and learn how that goes, and learn how to regenerate the land? Thanks to plant medicines like ayahuasca and psilocybin and various others, especially ayahuasca, which really is an earth-based medicine. I had this deep, my connection to nature and my connection to Gaia continued to deepen and broaden every time I would sit with that medicine. And so it just made sense, the timing of it. Let's do this now and not wait on that. And we were fortunate enough, with the sale of On It and Aubrey's help to make all this work out. But yeah, there is a tranquility and a way that I can go to sleep at night, just knowing that we've got our own food, we've got our own water, we are on grid, off grid, and can work with both. We're well equipped if things go south. A lot of team members are, one of my best friends who's the GM of the farm was an EOD in the Navy. Another guy was a ground forces guy who's got his own coffee company and helps here on the land. And just great people, but also they know what the fuck to do if something goes sour. So and they're also family men, and that makes a big difference too. So it's nice to be surrounded by families, other fathers, that we all work together, but they're also like-minded. They can see what 2020 was in reality and know that whatever agency helped spark that likely isn't done yet, and that there probably is something else up their sleeve. You look at Agenda 2030 and stuff like that. It just makes sense, to really do your best to prepare for another bad day, another bad year. And I think there is a level of tranquility and ability to sleep at night because I let fear light a fire under my ass. And so now I look at fear very differently. Whereas if you're crippled by it, like in a fight, and I don't use that to spark myself and do better, that's where fear wins. But if I can utilize fear as a healthy fear and understand this is an emotion I'll never get rid of fully, but let me use that to light a fire under my ass to do something that's going to help me shift the way that I live right now and change the way that I view that fear, then that can be a huge positive. And so I give a lot of credit to fear for being the reason we have this regenerative farm. We're doing permaculture. We're having events here, lifting consciousness through those events and helping people to learn and grow and reconnect to the land. So a lot of respect for fear and thankful for 2020 in many ways.
Yeah, me too. And, on the concept of fear, I've certainly had plenty of it in my life. And, that goes all the way back to childhood, but also to when I was a motocross racer, I was pushing myself right to the frickin' edge of my capacity to not die, like literally how fast can you get around that track without just becoming part of a tree? And I learned a lot from that and many concussions. And then, of course, you and I have both got quite a comprehensive history of plant medicines. And why I'm bringing this up is because, and also my own fight career, and I agree, being afraid in a fight is never helpful. But what I have learned from fear, especially in deep ceremony, is that fear takes on a different quality when it inspires deep respect. And when I go into a deep ceremony, I don't have fear of God like I'm afraid of a guy pulling a gun and pointing it at my head kind of fear, but I have tremendous fear for the power and the magnitude and the magnificence of God and the fact that I must be very, very respectful because, the depth of journeys that I do and that you do, there's a real possibility of dying in a journey like that. And I've known 6 people personally to die in a plant medicine ceremony. And I can safely say in all cases, because they did not have enough respect and they were, getting cocky. I think when the whole pandemic started, there was certainly a lot of strong fear in me because I'm a trained soldier and I can recognize when trouble is near. And I smelt a lot of it and still do for the same reasons you do. But that also brought me into a sense of I've got to respect the laws of nature. I've got to respect the universal law of impermanence and know that no matter how comfortable I like to be or consistent I like things to be, that, that doesn't fly in the face of impermanence. And so out of respect for reality, I had to, take measures to make sure that my family would be safe and also to, as you have with your podcast, to try to awaken as many others as possible to have a healthy level of fear and to have food and water on hand and to, not spiritual bypass. A lot of people spiritual bypass. One of the most common things I've heard, even from family members, is, God will take care of it all. I don't have to worry about anything. I'm like, yeah, right. Wait till there's no food and water for 3 days and see what God's got to say about that. So like there's a lot of spiritual bypassing going on. And I think that's not listening to fear as a teacher, as a guide. That's just playing a silly game. And, it is a lot of work and it's also not cheap. I mean, man, I've been working my ass off since we got here, and we've probably put at least $600,000 into our property. And I've been pushing myself hard to make all this happen and get Spirit Gym out. And I know you know exactly what I'm talking about, but it's I think for a lot of young men in the world and young women, there's nothing better than a good look in the eyes of reality to upgrade your status from child to adult and start participating in the world and participating in your own life. So I think COVID and all the events in the last 4 years have really been a great inspiration to bring people not only into a greater awareness of the reality of life, but for many, a greater awareness of why a spiritual practice is important. And one of the negative side effects is, as I'm sure you've seen plenty of, is so many people falling out of what used to be what we would call more of a holistic spiritual relationship or ideology into a fundamentalist religious ideology, which is normal. When people get afraid, they revert back in consciousness because they're afraid, so they're not thinking rationally. And you and I both know from being martial artists and the many things we've done in our life that you have to really focus your mind. You have to stay clear about what your objective is. But a lot of people, when they get scared, they break down. They're like a freeze reaction, and then they fall back into the herd because that's where the unconscious feels the safest. Because when you get too much cortisol running through you, it shuts down your right brain. So you get trapped in your left brain, and you don't really have a sense of connection to the whole anymore. So you have to seek it outside of yourself, which leads to isms and cults and fundamentalism, which really is, of course, they all know this. The social engineers know this, and they're driving people into these fundamentalist ideologies so that they will polarize again. If people aren't conscious of what's going on, we could easily go back into the days of crusades where Muslims are wiping out Christians and Christians are wiping out Muslims and Buddhists are wiping out Muslims and vice versa. I mean, we've got a long track record of exactly that kind of shit happen. Hi, everybody. Thank you for learning and growing with me and joining me on my podcast. A quick question for you. Do you know if you're getting enough magnesium? Because 4 out of 5 Americans aren't, and that's pretty much true worldwide. And that's a big problem because magnesium is involved in more than 600 biochemical reactions in your body. Today, I want to talk to you about the most common signs to look for that could indicate that you're magnesium deficient. Listen carefully to the end because there's a special offer happening, and this could be exactly what you need. So here we go on some of the common symptoms that indicate you might be magnesium deficient. Are you irritable or anxious? If you're not sure, ask your partner. Do you struggle with insomnia? Do you experience muscle cramps or twitches? Do you have high blood pressure? Are you constipated? Do you have a hard time falling asleep or getting a restful sleep? Do you feel more stressed than others that seem to be in the same or similar situations? Do you feel moody and wish your emotions were more stable? Do you feel you lack mental alertness? Do you feel you're at risk for osteoporosis and desire to build stronger bones? There are dozens of symptoms of magnesium deficiency, so these are just a few of the most common ones. Now, here's what most people don't know. Taking just any magnesium supplement won't solve your problem because most supplements use the cheapest kinds that your body simply can't absorb. That's why I personally recommend Magnesium Breakthrough. It's the only full-spectrum magnesium supplement with 7 unique forms of magnesium that your body can actually use and absorb. All Bioptimizer supplements are the best of the options available, or I wouldn't be offering them to you. I don't offer anything on my podcast that my family and I don't use ourselves. Bioptimizers is so committed to offering you the best quality products that really work that if you are not satisfied, you can get a full refund, no questions asked. In fact, they are so confident they offer a 365-day money-back guarantee.
And right now, for the entire month of November, Bioptimizers, the makers of Magnesium Breakthrough, are having a month-long Black Friday deal on all their products. And there are free gifts with your purchase. You can save 10% on all your products and up to 25% on special bundles, plus access up to $100 in free gifts with your purchase. This is the best time to stock up and take advantage of all the free extras you're going to get. You can only get this exclusive deal through the special link for Paul's listeners. So shop all month month long at bioptimizers.com/living4D and use the code Paul10 at checkout for your discounts and free gifts. That's bioptimizers.com/living4D and the code is Paul10.
One of the things that I really loved when I was at your place is, you showed me your little shooting range and one of your rifles that you do target practice with bear. And I haven't seen your kids in a while, and I could really feel the groundedness in them. Like there's a lot of spirit in your kids, and they seem really happy. I'd just love to hear your thoughts on what you feel living there has done for your children, but also what you feel an environment like that could give anybody's children that they're probably not getting in the way people live today typically.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big one. I think the vast majority of the test we're running, the experiment we're running, is yet to be seen, right? Because we've been here since April. It's been less than a year. One thing we always knew, having highly energetic kids, was get them outside. And so even though we had 1/10 of an acre in Austin, there was kind of through, we called it the secret passage. There was in between two houses in our suburb was a little back alleyway through across a creek into this big place that they ended up making into a frisbee golf course, disc golf. And so we'd go out there, we'd let our dog off leash, and we'd go for little 5K runs and go out there and throw disc golf and stuff like that. And sometimes Wolf would get tired and I'd pick her up and throw the disc golf with one hand, but we were always getting out there. And they had Cooper's hawks and cardinals and all sorts of stuff that we wouldn't see in the city, just on a 7-minute walk from us. So finding these little pockets of nature really do make a big difference. And I say that because odds are not a lot of people are going to get a 100-acre plot of land that are listening to this podcast. And I don't think you need that as long as you make an effort to go out to it, right? And we'd go out to Barton Springs and different places to be in the water where there's fresh, beautiful watering holes here in Texas. And it was actually funny because we were out there, and this is right when I started diving into maritime law and Commonwealth law. But a police officer came out. Austin PD is great. I'm buddies with a lot of their guys. We do training at Sheepdog Response with Tim Kennedy, and he's got a lot of the APD guys there, SWAT team guys there. They're awesome guys. They do jujitsu. They're good buddies. And so this guy tells me, he's like, "Hey, I'm really sorry, but you guys got to go." I was like, "Why do we have to leave? we're outside. We're in the water." And he goes, I don't know. This is what I've been told to do from the mayor, and I'm sorry, but you got to go home. Nobody's allowed to be outside. And I go, "Why aren't you making that guy on the canoe leave?" And he goes, "I don't know why, but if you're on a boat, then you're fine." And I was like, "No shit." And I was like, "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard." But we went and bought paddle boards that next weekend, and we'd go on the water the whole time. We'd be on the water. They wouldn't even walk up to us if we were on the water. So it was a very interesting thing. But I mean, even a bad situation like that can force you to make a good decision, and now that we've got 118 acres with 3 ponds, we're out on the water constantly. Even now that, we've had a drought and it's starting to sink, and there's lots of these clay hills and stuff like that, we'll get out there and it's better than a sandcastle because the clay will stick. So you can start to make fortresses out of that clay, and the kids absolutely love it. To your point, already it's impacted them. I mean, there's still, these guys are city kids too, born and raised. So as far as like getting them to clean the chicken coop and things like that, there's some head butting that happens. That's a natural thing, right? Like, that's not like they're like, "Yeah, Dad, let me help out."
Yeah.
Like, they're not like that. But over enough time, that just becomes routine. I had a lot of arguments with Bear about walking the dogs. I'd never have a problem walking my dog, but he's got to hold, a 9-month-old Pyrenees in 2 hands that's running around crazy, not listening, that's not trained, on a leash. And all of a sudden he doesn't like walking the dogs, but 5 minutes into the walk, when he sees some of these other exotic animals, then he's pulled back in. Like all the complaining's gone. It just wipes away real quick. Bear likes doing, he likes pickleball, but he really likes jiu-jitsu, and that's indoors. It's not the same thing. Even playing football, we'd play in the snow, play in the rain, playing in the mud on real grass. And that was always a connection point for me. And he's interested in it, but the kids do love being outside. They love the water, and just finding ways to make that happen has been a blessing, because it's what allows them to be themselves. It's what allows them to relax. I remember when I was a kid, my mom, she'd say, "Get the fuck out of the house. Don't come back till lunch." That's literally what she'd tell me as a 7-year-old. Get the fuck out and don't come back till lunch. And it was firm. And so, "Okay, Mom, we're out." We'd leave, we'd come back at lunch, eat a sandwich, right back outside again all summer long. And so it's nice. And use the same language with our children, but there's a draw, right? And I can see too, if it's raining for a week and the kids don't want to go out, it's like, no, throw on your raincoat. We're going outside anyways. And our little girl in particular, has real sensitivity to weather and stuff like that, because she's 4 and just highly sensitive. But she'll get out there and she'll play in the mud. Like, oh yeah, I don't mind being muddy. It has been a huge blessing. It is something we always knew and understood as well, just because it was baked into me and Natasha. If I'm inside for too long, I get antsy, I get stir crazy. I don't know why either, right? Until I go outside and I'm like, oh yeah, this is where I'm supposed to be. Now I can relax.
It's called instincts.
Yep.
It's truly instincts. Yeah, it's interesting. My kids, they're pretty good. Mana really loves to do things. I mean, yes, they're more interested in doing what they want to do, but they will get out and they help every night with the chickens and the goats and all the things, the pigs and the things the kids love to do, though, and they'll do it all by themselves. It's funny because if they're, we regulate how much time they get on iPads and television, but they'll self-regulate. They'll literally get up, walk outside, and they'll go out and they're just all over the fruit trees and the raspberries and the blackberries and the strawberries. And the thing I gotta watch is these 2 kids can eat the damn property up. I'm like, they're just walking around pigging out all the time. I'm like, God, you guys, you gotta let stuff grow. I mean, they'll even eat green strawberries and apples that are like the size of a golf ball. I'm like, that thing will get 3 times as big if you just give it a chance. Like, we want one now. It's just so funny to see how they absolutely just love picking stuff off the vine and eating it. And they're just fantastic at eating good food, and on the size of the land, just for the listeners, a lot of people may have it in their head, I can't afford property, and they might, talk themselves out of it. But there's all sorts of ways to get on land. You can find a farmer, you can work for them, you can rent, you can do a deal. A lot of farms will I've known of many farms that will bring you on, give you a place to stay, but you have to earn your keep. In fact, two of my closest friends and practitioners, you remember Kirsty and Michael that were our nannies?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Kirsty does my social media, and they got an arrangement with a farm outside of Toronto, and they now live there. And Michael's one of the managers of the farm, and they live there and work on the farm. And that's 100 acre, I think 100 or 100 and something acre organic farm with cattle and all sorts of stuff. So Michael's working his ass off, but there's an opportunity. But what I wanted to share about this for people listening is that you don't really need a lot of land. Angie and Penny met a guy who gives food and things to the Waldorf schools, and he invited them to come over and see his place, and they've gone there many times. But this guy basically uses a permaculture type model, and he's only got 1 acre. And Kyle, this guy produces so much food on 1 acre. It's mind boggling. Like, the girls will be bringing home buckets of this or buckets of that. And he just gives it away because him and his wife, he's like a 70-year-old guy, and him and his wife cannot even possibly consume that volume of food, but they've got loads of food. And the girls are just astounded at how well done he has set it up and how it is just pumping all the time. And even in the winter, of course, there's winter crops. It's amazing. Like, if people realize, like, when we lived in Vista, we had 3/4 of an acre, but as you might remember from my front yard, it was mostly rocks for my rock lifting garden and workshops. And we had a bunch of lemon trees and lime trees, but we put bed gardens in behind the house. And I think we had 3 or 4 box bed gardens, and we were making enough food that we had lots of food. We were always having fresh vegetables with our meals, and it doesn't take that much. So the point is, as you alluded to, I don't think the games are over yet. So I don't think people should stop thinking about these things, and at minimum, get some bed gardens and set yourself up. It's interesting too, because you may have heard me talk about this before, but during the First and Second World War, when there was bread lines and the economy was dead and people were really in dire straits for food, 50% of the U.S. population fed itself largely from backyard gardens. And during that time, the rates of illnesses and disease went through the floor. It was extremely low rates of illnesses and diseases. And as soon as the Second World War was over, within a year or so, the rates of disease started shooting right back up. So as soon as people went back to their normal ways and started eating food that they weren't growing, all the illnesses and diseases came running back again. which is quite a lesson. A lot of people that didn't have backyard gardens had to suffer with bread lines, but those that were growing vegetables and whatever they could produce, chickens and stuff in their backyards, had a completely different experience. In fact, I saw a video not too long ago that was a sort of a historical video, and it showed a video of a guy during the Depression. And he said, my father was a farmer, and during the Great Depression, he said, you wouldn't even know there was a depression. We were farming and selling our food, and we didn't experience any problems whatsoever. And it just went to show you that if you have land and you have food and people need food, that you have an actually pretty good insurance policy.
Yeah, it's really important. I think even before this, because of 2020, before we had this land, we made good friends with the Force of Nature guys. They actually have a regenerative bison farm out in Fredericksburg, maybe 90 minutes west of Austin. And I probably told you this story already, but Bear was sitting on my lap as a 4-year-old when we harvested a bison, and he helped me field dress it. This giant, beautiful, incredible animal. We kept that bison pelt. We kept her skull Euro style. And she fed Bear as a young man, fed me, and fed my wife while she was growing our little girl inside her body. And that level of connection to food and understanding this is where our meat comes from. This is what this actually takes. It takes the death of something else to sustain us.
Yes.
Whether that's a plant or an animal. And I think that reconnection point is such a beautiful one. We have a lot of people that come through here, people that are interested in permaculture or regenerative agriculture. And looking at the documentary, The Biggest Little Farm, that was 200 acres. And so I walked the land with Charles Eisenstein. I walked the land with Zach Bush, and I asked them, should we burn the whole thing if we're going to use this 118? And both of them said the same thing. You got to feel into that. And as I felt into that, it didn't make sense to destroy all the ecosystems that existed here prior to us. And we had a little 9-acre area that the guy had used for his ag exemption. It was just wild sunflowers, no fertilizers, no chemicals, no glyphosate. None of that stuff was sprayed in the ground. And so we converted that with Chad Johnson, who was an expert trained under Sepp Holzer, who wrote the book Permaculture and Desert of Paradise. Great guy. And we did 400 fruit and nut trees on 3 acres. So we've got 200 chickens out there. They're on berms. We can grow sweet potatoes and Japanese yams in the berms as well. We've got comfrey and different things like that. And this beautiful water spiral that goes through it. So over time, in about 15 years, every root structure from those trees will touch its own water source, and then it's hands off for the most part. So that's been a really cool thing to set up. And again, you can do a lot with a very small footprint. And, most people don't need 200 hens, egg laying hens, or 400 fruit and nut trees. But if you think all you've got is a quarter acre, there's a lot you can do on a quarter acre. There's a lot you can do on a half acre. And to your point with the guy that you and Angie met through the Waldorf schools, on an acre, if you know what you're doing, you can produce way more than you need. And that's really a beautiful thing. That's one of the things, Ice Age Farmer, I don't know if you remember him. There's a lot of great videos from him in 2020. I think he got silenced, unfortunately, if you know what I mean. But he said one of the things that humanity will need to do going forward is to produce more than they consume.
Yes.
And I really took that to heart. And, not all of us are going to become farmers. Not all of us have to. But you should know where your food comes from and have a relationship with your farmers.
That's extremely critical now. I mean, the amount of poisons they're putting into the food. And I've watched a few videos now of people, microscopists and doctors showing all the quantum dot technology they're putting in Pepsi and Coca-Cola. And I've seen several reports from doctors and others around the world showing that there's a lot of the vaccine ingredients now and vitamin supplements, children's cereals, that. And then you got the sky being bombarded. It's just unfrickin' believable, the darkness that's going on. And it really concerns me because of the environmental impact of all this stuff. And, there's just some of this stuff is so big, it's going to take a worldwide effort from everybody to put an end to all this. Hi, everybody. Hope you're enjoying the show. I thought I'd take a minute to sing you a little song. Dr. Quiet, she is yin. Know how she loves to bring energy in. She teaches you how to rest so your energy is always at its best. Hey! And I want to tell you a little secret. You know how I support Dr. Quiet?
I use Organifi Gold, and it does some magic to help you sleep deeper and restore better so you can get up and be a freedom fighter first thing in the morning and all through the day. And I got Drew Canoli, who created the product, right here, right now, to tell us why it works so well. Drew, what's so unique about Organifi Gold except the fact that my kids won't stop asking for it?
I love this song.
Thank you.
And I think if we were DJing this, we would do Reishi. Because Reishi, full spectrum, 8-to-1, beta glucans, knock you out. The queen of mushroom. Reishi is one of the most powerful things we can put in our body, especially at night. Helps restore, revitalize. Great for the liver.
Yes.
So while we sleep, not only are we restoring and repairing the cells, but we're detoxing in the most effective way possible.
Yes.
And it doesn't have to taste bad. In fact, it could be something you crave.
Yeah.
And that's Organifi Gold. It tastes like autumn had a baby with a marshmallow. Every time I have it, it just knocks me out. I've literally tracked it with my Whoop, my Oura Ring, and it adds another hour to an hour and a half of deep sleep.
That's great.
REM and deep every single night.
You know what's also really cool? Reishi is a wise man. It's not only the name of a mushroom, but a reishi is a wise man.
Oh, true story.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
It's absolutely true. I'm not pulling your leg.
And how much wisdom have you and I gained from night school?
A lot of wisdom.
Yep.
Yes, and you gain a lot when you can't sleep. You go, what am I doing wrong? And how do I get it fixed up? So, hey, one time when I was visiting you at your house, you made me a Organifi Gold as a hot tea, and I'd never realized you could make it hot.
It's the best way.
And I was like blown away. I'm like, wow, this is incredibly good. It tastes like dessert.
Mm-hmm.
But unlike most sweet things, if you take sweet stuff at night, you can't sleep very well, and it jacks you up. But this stuff was just so relaxing and so amazing. I was like, wow, this is incredible.
And I know you're allergic to coconut.
Yeah.
Right? But what I like to do, and this is when I'm being bad, you see, there's a much bigger cannoli than the cannoli you see today. I would eat ice cream and all kinds of comfort food because I'm from Michigan. But one thing that put my cravings in check, I take a little cocoa whip.
Yeah.
I put it on top of this
that's
golden
nice.
tea.
Okay.
It is the best drink at night you could ever have. It's amazing.
Yeah. I'm intolerant. I'm not allergic, so I did try it. It just makes me feel stressed, but I found that, if I don't overdo it, I'm good to go.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really excited to have everybody try Organifi Gold because we all need to sleep deep and pay attention to what our soul tells us while we dream so we can work together to make this world a beautiful place for everybody and get our freedom back and get rid of the toxins in the government and other things we need to do.
And now, for a limited time, Organifi Gold Pumpkin Spice is back. All the goodness of regular Organifi Gold with the flavors of fall: pumpkin, cinnamon, nutmeg, and allspice. Go to Organifi.com/Chek20 and use the code Chek20 to get 20% off your order of Organifi Gold Pumpkin Spice. That's Organifi.com/Chek20 and the code is CHEK20 to get 20% off your order. Sleep well.
I'm really delighted that RFK making the assumption that Trump does win the election. It's not a question of whether he's going to win. I think we all know that it's what they're going to do politically to keep that, whatever the fuck they're going to do. That's the question. That might be the next big event coming up here. It might have already happened by the time this podcast is out. But, knowing RFK is going to be in there and start cleaning some of this shit up, it's really, really important. And anybody that wants to be conscious of their health and the health of their children, they're going to be a lot wiser to grow even with a few bed gardens in the backyard. And I've got studies from years ago, the book, The Living Soil and the Holly Experiment by Lady Eve Balfour, who's really probably the pioneer of the concept that we use now when we say organic farming. I don't know if you've ever seen that book, but it's priceless and lots of studies in there. But she shows, for example, they did studies on the sperm count of men, and they found that all the way back then, men in cities were having very low sperm counts. And that then they gave men a diet of 1/4 organic, 1/2 organic, and then 100% organic food. And they showed that even with a diet of 25% organic food, there was a significant increase in the number of sperm a man would produce per ejaculation. And then at half organic diet, they were up to the sperm count for men in 1938, I believe it was. And with full organic, then they exceeded it. And so the point being, it doesn't take that much high quality food to really bolster the body with the nutrients and the resources it needs to keep itself healthy and to keep the anabolic functions of the body working. So these are all important things. This is the kind of stuff I wanted to talk to you about. Not that we don't have lots to talk about as it is, but I think it's just very important for people to be reminded that, just because it seems like it's settled down a bit since COVID doesn't mean that you shouldn't be thinking about these things. Being conscious and knowing where water's at, knowing where food's at, having reserves. Preparation is important. I mean, when I was a stock car racer and a drag racer, preparation was critical. If you don't prepare properly and you're running a machine that hard, you always find where your lack of preparation leads to weaknesses. When I was a paratrooper, we did extensive preparation for each jump. We would do like 10 equipment checks in the span of a couple of hours. Just, you never know when you might overlook something, find a clip that's not done up or whatever. And I don't think now's the time for people to be childish about this and expect some organization's going to rescue them. I mean, we've also seen what's happened with the fire situations and the flood situations. And I don't know if you saw the videos about the guy who was a helicopter pilot and he went to rescue people up in the flooding in North Carolina recently. And there was people crying for help and they were stranded. It was an older couple and a child, or a husband, wife, and a child, if I remember right. So he flew his helicopter up. I think he could only grab two of them. So he took the wife and the child. And when he flew back to get the husband, some government officials ended up being there and told him he was not allowed to fly. He was not allowed to rescue anybody. And others were told they weren't allowed to rescue anybody. So they were actually stopping people from being rescued. They were stopping people from getting food and support. So there's a lot of crooked shit going on. And you have to kind of really have some foresight, or, you can get bit in the ass, metaphorically. But with that out of the way, I love your podcast. And I'm sure you, like me, are a guy that has hands on several great podcasts, but can't even come close to keeping up with all of them. And every now and then I'll be in the gym, looking through the podcast feed. I'll see somebody that you're interviewing. I'll listen. And I'm always grateful that I did, because you get some great guests. I love just your raw authenticity on your podcast. Just like, okay, I love Kyle because you get Kyle every time. There's no fluff, no manufactured personality. That's my favorite. Today you were going to share your top 10. Now, how long back are you going? I mean, we did this, a couple of years ago?
Yeah, I just stuck to this year. And I go back, I think, to maybe Q1. There's only one podcast early on. It could have been February or April. I'm not sure when, but it was with Mark Gober. And I just take that all, my favorites all the way up from there.
Well, good, because I'm meeting with him today to be on my podcast with your support. And I've read,
incredible.
I think I've read 3 of his books, so I'm excited to meet with him and map out a podcast. I think that'll be a great listen for people.
Yeah, Gober's special. He's come on. I got a hold of him after our homie Dr. Nathan Riley was telling me about his book, An End to Upside Down Reset. Maybe it was his 3rd book. So he had already had An End to Upside Down Thinking and An End to Upside Down Living. And I got his 3rd book and was just blown. An End to Upside Down Liberty was his 3rd one. Absolutely incredible. Was the first guy who was really able to map what politics would actually look like with the correct understanding of spirit.
Awesome.
And blew my fucking mind. I'd never seen anyone talk politics with the correct understanding of unity consciousness and a non-dual reality. And I was floored. And really just a beautiful, beautiful layout. You could tell he's a brilliant mind. I think he's an Ivy League guy, but very well researched. And he's not afraid to get into the weeds either. He did An End to Upside Down Contact, where he talked a lot about alien entities, plant medicines, interdimensional beings. He talks about darkness in that and really lays it out. It's a tough pill to swallow, but he doesn't, he doesn't beat around the bush when it comes to that, when it comes to satanic practices, children, all the shit that most people just want to scoff and brush to the side. He really takes a deep dive into those things, and also talks a bit about spiritual bypass when it comes to that as well. But loved him on that one. He's every book he writes, I tell him, anytime you read a new book, you're coming back on the podcast. He's been on, I think, 3 times. Just an excellent, excellent guest and a brilliant thinker. So I was super stoked to have Mark, and I'm really excited to listen to you guys.
It'll be fun, I'm sure. So you want to take us through your hit list?
I'll run us right through. So yeah, I got Gober is 341, and no particular order. I just went from past to present. These are the ones that really stuck out to me. To the conversation we've been having. This guest, Tim Larkin, was a former. He had worked a lot with the Navy SEALs. He actually blew his eardrum out in buds and couldn't become one. Has a really interesting story. He's an author. He wrote When Violence is the Answer. And I think it's one of the most important books people could read because, there's social violence like you see on the playground where it's, just like a dog or the roosters with the pecking order, right? That social violence is I'm going to push him. He's going to push me. Maybe I throw a punch and everyone oohs and ahs. And then after that, they know Kingsbury's the tough guy to look out for, and there's some sort of social hierarchy that gets established for that.
Yeah.
As childish as that is, that's a very natural thing. And we're not the only species that participates in that type of violence. But this amoral violence that he really describes is not one you can negotiate with. It's not one where people are actually, hey, look at me before I do this thing. It's the dead silent, can't be negotiated with, can't be talked down, can't be deterred from doing what they're going to do. We see this in some of the mass shootings in schools, jihad mentality. Some of the people who are, serial rapists and murderers, there's just no way around this. And so When Violence is the Answer is a description through many tales, some where you'll bump your fucking fist in the car like, yeah, and other times where you're just heartbroken, like absolutely broken, hearing when it doesn't go well for people, the understanding of what reality is and the people that he's worked with. An unfortunate fact is that 70% of the people that come to his seminars are victims. They're people that have been past victims of assault and battery, and those are the people he's got to work with. He has some great stories of people that have come through his class, been able to successfully defend themselves after it. But I love that book because I've come across a lot of people. I'm buddies with there's a lot of actors that have moved here, since 2020 from California, New York, and great, very famous movie stars and actors. And one in particular, couldn't wrap his head around why you would need a gun or why you would ever participate in that kind of violence. And this was before he had kids. So I'm interested in talking to him now, but I'm like, I can give you 2 reasons. My wife and my kids. That's why that violence would exist in me. And I wouldn't even think twice. I may have to process killing somebody. I don't have no delusions of grandeur about that. If that happened, yeah, I would need to talk to them on ayahuasca. I would need to meditate on them. I would wish them well, all those things. I would pray for their family, all of that. But I would not hesitate to use full force in defending the lives of the people that cannot protect themselves that I love. That book is an excellent read. It's pretty short. You can listen on Audible, and the podcast is great because he gives so many awesome examples of stories that weren't in the book, and it really unpacks more of the things that I really enjoyed from the book. So that's 349 Tim Larkin.
Tim Larkin, 349, 340. I'm going to check into that for sure. Before you go on, I've seen numerous videos now in the last year of Venezuelan gangs and others taking over apartment complexes, squatters kicking people out of, going into their house, not letting them back in. There's some crazy shit going on. I saw one in Italy, a bunch of these migrant gang people that don't even belong there formed like a motorcycle gang and went through and just destroyed a whole township. Just pure violence, shooting, knives, just crazy shit, and it's like, there's, days where I really ponder if it's time for me to get guns for Angie and Penny. And, I've always been in this tug of war in myself, because when I left the 82nd Airborne Division, I grew up with guns in every corner. We had guns all over the farm and, for more reasons than I'll get into right now. But when I left the Army, I just, part of what was in my heart was to see if I could just detach myself from thinking, living, and having weapons around me, so that I oriented myself to my heart and didn't have this sort of urgency or tendency to rely on force, whether it be physical force or weaponry. But with the events that have been going on in the last 4 years, there's been many days, and I've had conversations with Angie and Penny about it. So I'm kind of watching carefully. I'm watching you and friends of mine, and I'm probably the last of all my friends to take up arms. But our next door neighbor turns out to be an active Green Beret, and he's told me in person, if anything ever happens, call me. I'll be right there, and it'll be taken care of. And so
I love it.
I can hear him he's got a shooting range on his property. So I hear him going at it quite often. He's gone a lot, but when he's here, I know he's here because I hear the rounds going off. These are real issues, and some of them are uncomfortable to have to process, but I think we've all got to be a realist about these issues for sure, especially when you've got millions and millions of illegal aliens and people with serious criminal records coming through. Like I was just having a conversation with Penny. I forgot that she can't vote. Penny's she's got a green card, because I'm American. She's married to me. She got a green card, but a person with a green card can't vote, but they're letting people with criminal records and no freaking passports or anything vote. I'm like, what the fuck is that? I mean, this is bullshit. There's just no, we seriously got problems, as you know. But anyhow, I won't rattle on about that. I think these are real issues. And I'm really glad you mentioned that podcast because I want to check it out and get the guy on my podcast too. So maybe you can make an introduction.
100%. I'd love to intro you guys. Tim's a great guy, a father, family man, lives in Vegas. He's an incredible human.
Perfect.
This week, we celebrate Thanksgiving here in the USA, which is a time to pause and be grateful for all our blessings. And so from Paul and the entire podcast team, thank you for listening and subscribing to Spirit Gym with Paul Chek. We truly appreciate your support of the show. And to show our appreciation, we have not one, but two special announcements. Next week, Paul will be doing a live Q&A for the Spirit Gym podcast members, where you will have the opportunity to ask him questions from his solo cast last week on the Big Six for Body, Mind, Health today. If you're not already a member, you can join the Spirit Gym community and attend the live Q&A by going to paulchek.com/podcast today. Secondly, if you have not already done so, make sure you grab your special VIP gift available to all listeners, a $50 credit to use on any of the Chek Institute online courses and bundles on sale this week during the annual Black Friday sale. Just go to chek.group/Black Friday 24 to request your credit. And while you are there, check out the amazing deals on offer with savings of up to 50% on the special bundles, plus all online courses are on sale. Buy one, get 10% off, buy two, get 20% off, and buy three or more for a 30% discount. So go to chek.group/Black Friday 24 and get yourself set up with all the courses and education you need to make a difference in your life and the lives of your family and clients at a big savings. The sale runs now until Monday, December 2nd.
Well, we switch gears here. I had Hannah Frankman on episode 355. Hannah's somebody I've been following. I forget her Instagram or Twitter handle, but she's got a really great account on X as it is now. I can find it for you guys in the show notes of that podcast. But Hannah Frankman was homeschooled K through 12. She's made it her life's mission to understand as an entrepreneur anything that's not status quo schooling, right? So she's not opposed to Waldorf or anything like that, but she's very against public education and for all the right reasons. And she's really taken a deep dive into all the different forms of education that would fall outside of that, from charter schools to Waldorf to various forms of homeschooling. And she's got a wealth of knowledge. She was fascinating to me. She has a brilliant take, and she has a lot of statistics on what that actually looks like. Every homeschooler I've ever interviewed, let's talk about guys like Jesse Elder, Daniel Schmachtenberger, James Schmachtenberger, who started Neurohacker Collective, one of the biggest supplement companies in the world. Some of the brightest minds in the world are part of that. Dr. Dan Stickler, Jamie Wheel, who I think has been on your podcast. Just incredible people are a part of that. So many others have come through. Our buddy Ben Greenfield, homeschooled K through 12, and Ben's an odd duck, as he'll say himself. He doesn't do well with teams. He's kind of an only player. He likes to play alone. Was a single sport guy, but nobody there. Out of those groups, all I find are incredibly intelligent people and a common thread. Greenfield, obviously, he would have to speak for, what life was like for him. But amongst the rest of them, they all had a similar thread in that their parents just got out of their way. The parents gave them the authority to choose their own path, to stick to the things that they really enjoyed and to deepen and broaden in those areas. And when it came to the rest of the crap, know the minimum effective dose, whatever that's going to be. If you need to test out, we live in a state, fortunately, where we don't have to follow state testing like California. We don't have to give our kids tests at the end of each year to make sure that they meet whatever standard California has for grade 1, grade 2, et cetera. With that, there's some pretty cool education styles that we have here. But I've learned, Rob Wolf also homeschools his kids. He told us about the Life of Fred books. Life of Fred books are all word-based mathematics. So you read through, and it starts with preschool all the way up through college level calculus. You can keep going as far as you want to go. But Bear absolutely loves Life of Fred. There's no pulling teeth. It's not like early on with getting him to walk the dogs or clean the chicken pen, even though that's a part of the routine now. He's always down to do Life of Fred. He really loves it. He loves being able to work his mathematical mind and get the correct answer. And he's excited about that. But it's done in a way where it grabs him. And I think that's a really cool thing because math never grabbed me in school.
Me either.
I was never impressed. I had one math teacher, my geometry teacher, who I really appreciated. But that's it. For fucking all the way through college, one math teacher that I liked. So Hannah Frankman was really cool on that. So people have questions about what is it like to homeschool? What are the different options outside of public school? Because, that's really what a big point was that she was making is for a lot of people, that are out there, single moms, 2-income families, people that don't have the ability to homeschool. How do you do that? How do you get around public school if you can't afford Waldorf, but you want to homeschool? There's co-ops. There's all sorts of things like that. And Bears participated in a homeschool co-op. That's where we met Mickey Willis, Del Bigtree, Tucker Max, James Vanderbeek. All these guys were a part of this homeschool co-op, and we didn't have to be there. Other parents were teaching, and we used a Waldorf style for it, Steiner style. But that was a homeschool co-op where we were still able to go do our own thing, and those do exist. So I think Hannah's got some really cool information for people that maybe are still attached to the system because they think there's no other way. There's many other ways.
Also, the Steiner system sells their homeschool curriculum. I don't know the company, but Angie works with them. We work with an organization. I don't know the name of it, but basically it's a homeschooling system. They send you the curriculum, and the Waldorf school that the kids go to is not a chartered school. It's actually an extension of this homeschooling program. And so what we're really paying the teachers for is to implement the homeschool strategies, but it's all based on the Steiner curriculum. But you can buy kits so that anybody that wants to homeschool at home and follow the Waldorf system can get all the books, everything they need, the toys or whatever's involved, all comes as part of the kit. And it's quite reasonable.
They'll send you blocks of wood.
Yeah.
that's a Steiner toy.
Yeah.
Get this stick and use your imagination.
Yes.
Yeah. So Hannah was great. She was 355. This podcast that's next is number 362 with Eric Godsey. And Eric Godsey is somebody who is a dear brother of mine. I've worked side by side with him since the On It days. We've worked side by side as coaches, full-time coaches in Fit for Service for the last 6 years. And Fit for Service is coming to an end this year. It may stick around by name, but it's going to morph into something else. Aubrey is pulling out to focus his efforts elsewhere in writing books and different things that he wants to give birth to. It's been bittersweet, seeing what we created come to an end and morph into something else. But Eric is one of my dear brothers. He's been really unpacking some deep journeys. He had his second darkness retreat where he was in the dark for, I think, 7 or 8 days. That's a psychedelic experience. It's full on. Yeah. When you have no light for 7 days. But one of the things that he came up with was this, and I don't want to butcher it. I'd rather you guys listen to it. But this idea of the internet as what he calls the shimmer. And it's not good or evil. It just is. But whatever we're creating, whatever we're giving birth to from a technological standpoint, this is the grand where it takes everything in, right? And if we look at most humans, maybe teeter-totter on what's right and what's wrong, but there's one golden thread inside of them that shows them the light. There's one piece of that is their conscience, the Jiminy Cricket that aims them in the right direction as a North Star. What he basically convinced me to do was that, you have, for people that have a good sense of self and have something to offer the world, to put your art into the shimmer. And through that, we attach that one golden thread to the machine, right? We give the machine heart. We give the machine soul. That was all, I was already leaning towards coming back on social media, but that was pretty much the straw that broke the camel's back. And, I'm back on Instagram now at Kyle Kingsbury, still on Twitter at Kingsbury, but I'm putting a lot of content out on Instagram simply because of his argument there. And it's a beautiful, beautiful understanding of what we're creating, whether we know so or not. And he's able to break that down in a really articulate way. I can tell he's he's really been chewing on this thing, all year long. We unpack his darkness retreats, we unpack his medicine journeys in that podcast, and you can see it all leading in this direction. So it was a fantastic podcast with Godzi.
That's great.
368 was Daniel Firth Griffith. Daniel's been on my podcast. He's actually a guy I wanted to introduce you to.
Oh, great.
He's an author. He's a true polymath. He's our mentor from a regenerative agriculture standpoint. He was an Alan Savory understudy, and he's good friends with your boy, Dr. Fred Provenza.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, great friends with Fred. He did like a 4-hour seminar here teaching on the land, and then we did a live podcast, which was incredible. But one of the things he talked about was a recent study that Fred Provenza put forth, where they knew on a conscious level that death mattered just as much as life. And we have such a high focus now on regenerative agriculture and how do we tend the soil and how do we make all systems elevate in a way where everything is healthier, from the soil to the grass to the animal itself. And intuitively, these guys understood, how they die, it has to matter. And so they worked on a study where they were able to see, they went to a country where the 3 main predators were still alive. And they studied all different hunting forms. And what they found was when an animal dies in a natural setting, there's no changes to the animal's blood pH. So even if I shoot and miss the animal in the heart, but I hit it in the gut and it somehow stays alive for 48 hours, even though it's going to have a slightly higher stress composition than something that gets shot in the head and then bled out quickly, it doesn't affect the bioavailability of the animal. Whereas the other picture is, and this is what happens with any meat we buy in the store. This is why it's a fucking huge deal. So even when I buy the best of the best regenerative bison, if it's processed, if they're selling it at a store, it had to be processed at the USDA. Now, I know this from bringing exotic animals in. When we first brought our red deer in and we first brought our black buck in, they were batshit crazy for about 2-3 weeks until they settled down. So think about whether it's a regenerative animal or it's been shipped off to a feedlot. When it goes to die at the USDA facility, it's shipped there on a truck. Now, it's not going to be comfortable in its new space. They put it in darkness. It's standing in its own feces and urine next to animals it knows they don't recognize. They can't see them, but they can smell them. And they're shoulder to shoulder with a bunch of animals they don't recognize. They get prodded to go through a chute. And in that chute, a machine clamps both ribs. That way they can't move on either side. They get clamped in. And then the No Country for Old Men comes down and thunks right back of the brain, and they die. The pure panic that goes through that animal raises their pH so high that it actually makes the micronutrients and bioavailability of it 50% less available.
Wow, that's
so
crazy.
Understand that half, you're getting half, even of the best. What's available to you, only half is available because it changes that pH to a level that's absolutely unnatural. Whereas even they looked at persistence hunters who will run marathons, exhausting animals down before they can get to it and kill the animal. That animal still doesn't have that pH change. That animal is still 100% bioavailable because it had the ability to run. It had the ability to defend itself. It had the ability to stay in its natural environment and fight for its own life. You ship it off to the USDA, that's not the case. And a lot of people would say, well, how do I work around that if I'm not a farmer? You can do what I did. You can go out to your local farm, shoot the animal, field dress it there, and you buy that animal before you kill it. You are allowed to kill your own animal on someone else's land. And most ranchers will allow that. They'll say, sure, come be a part of this. If you're not comfortable with firearms, you can probably find someone who is to take the shot and help you field dress the animal. And then that, number one, first and foremost, on a spiritual level, connects you to the thing that you're eating in a way that's indescribable otherwise. It's akin to a plant medicine journey. If you've never done it, you don't know what the hell we're talking about. But when you harvest your own food, even a harvest rather than a hunt, there is a deep spiritual bond that takes place. Every time you eat that animal, you know what it took to bring that to sustain yourself. And this is the way in which we get the full access of all the nutrition, all the micronutrients, the heme iron, the every vitamin and mineral that's baked into that animal, in the liver, the heart, the meat, that's all going to come to you because you were able to harvest it in a natural environment. So that blew my mind. There's a lot of other stuff, a lot of indigenous wisdom in the podcast with Daniel Firth Griffith, but laying that out, it changed the way we harvest here on our land. Last year, we took 30 ram lamb out to the USDA just so we'd have the ability to sell it and give it away. Twice a week now, we'll take out 2 to 3 ram lamb. We'll field dress them ourselves, knowing they can die here with food in their mouth next to their family on the land they grew up on. And that makes all the difference in the world.
If you have listened to even one episode of Paul's podcast before, then you will know that he is passionate, and some would say even fanatical, about the quality of the food he eats and where it is sourced from. That is why the Chek household only eats pasture-raised meat, wild-caught fish, and organic produce. And that is why we subscribe to Wild Pastures meat delivery service. Each month, Wild Pastures delivers a box of meat that has been raised by family farmers in the USA using regenerative farming practices. 100% grass-fed and finished beef, pasture-raised chicken, and pasture-raised pork, as well as wild-caught seafood. You can customize the selection in your box, add on extra when you know you will be feeding more people, or change your options each and every month. You might be thinking that this will be too expensive for you, but Wild Pasture's mission is to offer the highest quality meat at the lowest prices because they want to transform the meat industry. And that means that more people need to be able to choose meat that is raised right. Their pasture-raised animals are part of a natural ecosystem. Their farmers use rotational grazing, practices that mimic nature, and so do not need to use synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, hormones, or antibiotics. This beautiful process doesn't require the external resources, such as massive amounts of GMO grain, required with environmentally depleting conventional methods. And best of all, the meat and fish taste amazing. And for Paul's listeners, Wild Pastures are offering you 20% off your subscription for life, $15 off your first order, and free shipping. Seriously, you can't find a better deal for top quality pasture-raised meat. Go to wildpastures.com/Paul Chek. You don't need a promo code. Just visit wildpastures.com/Paul Chek and start choosing the goodies you will have delivered to you in your first box.
Wouldn't the blood of the animal go to acidic? Because you said that it raises the pH, which would be alkaline. I'm just curious because stress responses are acidic.
Yeah, it could have been that, but raising meaning it's running in one direction. It probably is running acidic rather than going to more alkaline. So it's dropping acidic, but I mean the raising as like its stress is going through the roof.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
yeah.
The alkalinity probably is tanking and dropping to a 1 or a 2.
Yeah, when I was on the farm, we raised sheep and pigs and cows. There was plenty of trips to the slaughterhouse to make money off meat and to have our own. My father would slaughter and dress a lot of our own animals, but sometimes we had too many, so he would take them out. I grew up around I raised these animals. I raised animals from the time they were born till they were 500-pound pigs on their way to slaughter. I was with them every day. I love these things. I used to ride them as a kid and pet them. And it was heartbreaking for me to know I'm eating sausage out of the friend that I had, But these guys, when we were loading them onto our cattle truck to go to slaughter, their behavior's different than if you're just moving them somewhere else. They're a lot more intuitive and a lot smarter than people that aren't familiar with being around animals think they are. It's because I know these things like you do that when you hear the World Economic Forum saying, there's no soul, there's no God, you're a hackable animal. And you look at the B.F. Skinner mindset, animals are just biological robots that don't have feelings, emotions, or thoughts. I'm like, this is so, the only words I can use to describe it are all swear words because it's that disgustingly disconnected. And it deeply concerns me when you get this many people with that much power in places like the World Economic Forum and throughout the scientific establishments and in universities. I mean, this is how they justify doing very intense research on animals where, some of the research I've seen done on animals is enough to just break your heart. And so I'm just glad that you're sharing that because people need to know this stuff.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm excited, and I'm excited to keep learning from people like that. You said the big word in that, and that's disconnect, right? And I think we all have a disconnect. If you watch Food Inc., they get back to that most people assume the meat looks that way. You see a ribeye and you're like, that's a ribeye. The cut, but you don't think of the animal. And even if it has a little juice in it, that's not blood. You would say, oh, yeah, there's a little blood in it. It's like, no, that's not blood. The amount, if you bleed an animal and watch the amount of blood that comes out of that body, that goes back to the land and feeds the soil. There's a great respect for every part of that animal. When we harvest our lamb when we bring their guts out to the animals, and I see 20 vultures circling overhead just waiting for it. I hear the coyotes yipping at night because they have food to eat. It's a big deal, and then their feces goes right back into the earth, and it's the fastest way to turn that animal over and give it back to the earth.
It's the cycle of life.
Absolutely. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things our kids getting, going back to the beginning, is a firm understanding that bear. We did some rooster harvests and he participated in that. And then he bled his first ram lamb this week, actually, and there's a lot of reverence that comes from that. It is an emotional thing.
Yeah.
Every time I went on an elk hunt 2 years ago and shot an elk, and it brought me to tears because I have all the feels. There's the feels of, fuck yeah, I got it. And I'm excited. And holy shit, I'm proud that I could hit a 380-yard shot at 33-mile-an-hour wind and adjust for that. And that we made it to the right spot where the windage was right. And we didn't get hit with it and give ourselves away. And all the things that go into that hunt from a victory standpoint. And then the understanding that I just took something's life and that we're going to use that to sustain our own. And it's everything. It's every feel in the body, every emotion. And I don't want that to go away. I think that's a beautiful thing. And I can see that in my kids, when they get to participate, and I just nod my head. That's right. It's all of it. It's every feel.
Well, it makes eating sacred. And I'm a guy that's, as you know, tapped in enough to tell you the same is true of plants, but we've just become so, shall we say, acclimatized to thinking that plants are not conscious, but without a long to do. I mean, when I hear all this vegetarian craziness about killing animals, but acting like it's just fine to kill plants unconsciously, I'm like, you have no idea what you're talking about. You giving me all this spiritual elitism, but you're just proving to a guy like me that you're sound asleep and you're caught in an ism. And that's what you're just living out a cult-like behavior, but there's no consciousness in it. It's just really another cult.
Another tribe to be a part of. It's very tribal.
Yeah. And whenever you have a cult, you got a leader and you have a belief system which inherently stops a person from asking questions because they think that the word of the cult leader or the ideology is the end word, just like, reading scripture from a fundamentalist view. It's God's word and no one's ever been involved in it, which is ridiculous. But this is why, I deeply connect to everything I eat and drink and say thank you for the love you have given Mother Earth and Mother Universe. Thank you for the love you're giving me now. It is with great love and respect that I bring you into my being so that together we can make the world a better place for all living beings now and in the future. And I've been trying to tell the vegetarians for a long, long time that when you bring something into you with the spiritual awareness that your existence cannot be here without its giving its life to you, and that the spirit of that animal does not die, but it can join you. And if you bring a plant or an animal into your body in that state of consciousness, that spirit is now evolving into a human being. And that's, to go from a carrot or a tomato to human, or a sheep to human, or any of those things, to being a human that's conscious, that devotes its life to reverence, respect, and protect for the unnecessary destruction and slaughter of all living beings. That, to me, is the greatest gift we can give the plant and animal kingdom. And I've lived my life that way since I was a child because I was raised on a farm, and I had, like we just talked about, I had to go through the pain of watching my friends die and knowing that I was eating them, usually the next day. Sometimes we would castrate animals, pigs or bulls, and before the pulse was gone out of those testicles, it was in a frying pan and we were eating them.
That's why your testosterone's so high.
Well, yeah, maybe
that'll do it.
It's not as high as I wish it was these days. I'm getting up there in age, but
I'll send you some sheep testicles. These guys, I'm not exaggerating here. They're like 8 to 10 inches long and thick. I was like,
I know
they're packing some meat.
We used to have rams with balls like they could barely walk. They had such big nuts. These things would just waggle. I'm like, man, that must be uncomfortable as hell.
It's odd from an evolutionary standpoint to have balls that big. That's for sure.
That's one hell of a load they deliver.
Well, we got I'm on the top 5 now, and again, this is just based on time, not based on quality. But 369 was a guy named Jacob Israel Lieberman, and I talked about having Jack Cruz on the podcast, and Jack said a lot of stupid shit, but he also knows his stuff when it comes to light therapy. And, because of his podcast with Andrew Huberman, I started to deep dive this stuff. our friend Matt Maruka.
Oh, I listened to that one.
Yeah.
I listened to that, and I've read 2 of his books.
Yeah.
I've read 2 of his books.
Phenomenal. So I started with Health and Light from John Ott, OTT, and that's really a phenomenal book that changed my understanding of the sun, changed my understanding of light. I was always a California-raised kid outside at the beach, wouldn't burn, never wore sunscreen, and have blue blockers and things like that for when I'm indoors. So I figured I had it understood and didn't need to learn much else. And when I read John Ott's book, Health and Light, I was floored.
I read that book a long time. I've been sharing that book in HLC training since the beginning of my HLC program in probably 2005.
Yeah, it is a must read. In the classes that I teach in Fit for Service on Physically Fit, I have 2 required readings. Can you guess what they are?
Well, that one.
There's that one, and then How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy. Those are the only.
Yay!
I have so many books that I can recommend, but there's 2 that you have to read, and those are the 2 you have to read, because then we're on the same page. Then I know where your test scores are, but I know I don't have to convince you of all these other things, right? And when you understand that, that's an important thing. This book, Light Medicine of the Future, from Dr. Jacob Israel Lieberman, kept getting recommended to me from Amazon. And after I finished John Ott's book, I was like, well, how much fucking more can there be? So I bought it. It was $12. And I immediately flipped to the end. And I'm like, if he doesn't have John Ott somewhere quoted in this book, this is bullshit. It's going to be trash. And I go to the end there and I realize Ott writes the foreword. And so Ott basically, Ott says he's running a relay race. He's the first in the leg, and he's passed the baton to Jacob Lieberman. And Lieberman's running the race, and he's going to pass the baton to someone in the near future. And that was all I needed to hear. So I read that thing start to finish. I dove into a few of his other ones. He's got another one that's great, Take Off Your Glasses and See. And what is it called? Luminous Life, which is a shorter book, and it's more on where light meets spirituality. They're brilliant books.
Those are the 2 that I've been through.
Yeah, and he's 77 now. He's writing his memoir, of his life's journeys. He said some crazy shit. He healed his vision. He became an optometrist because he had bad eyes and wanted to understand better. And spirit drew him there. He had allurement. We'll talk about that, towards the end here. But he had a 300% increase in vision in one meditation. He'd been meditating for a while, crazy. But in one meditation, boom, the lights went on. He took off his glasses and he understood he had changed his vision for the rest of his life. So he's just a brilliant, brilliant mind. And one thing I want to read from this book, that we brought up, which was mind-blowing. There's a little chart here, and it's page 10. So it's fairly early on, and I'll read this in case, most people are listening, not watching on YouTube, or if this stays on YouTube.
Yeah.
It says, so on the left-hand side and on the right-hand side, there's 2 different things, but they lead to the same thing. On the left-hand side, it says gradual and consistent exposure to sunlight yields. On the right-hand side, it says gradual and consistent program of exercise yields. And it goes to the same things: decreased resting heart rate, decreased blood pressure, decreased respiratory rate, decreased blood sugar, decreased lactic acid in the blood following exercise, increased energy, strength, and endurance, increased tolerance to stress, increased ability of the blood to absorb and carry oxygen. Sunlight and exercise both do these exact same things. Now, I don't think you're going to get jacked from sunlight, but from a health standpoint, from a longevity standpoint, that checks damn near every box. And I can see why Cruz is so obsessed with the sun when it comes to that. I think where he goes wrong, and you'd agree, is that you can't shit on Dr. Diet and Dr. Movement, right? But
no, or Dr. Quiet.
Exactly. But sunlight is that important. And, I'll bring that up further, in the next one. But Lieberman was awesome. I loved him. I always feel there's a sense of awe when I'm with somebody of that age who has that much life experience and that much brilliance inside of him. So I'm really excited.
Vitality running through him. He's still very vital.
Of vital health.
I was jealous when I heard your podcast because I reached out to him after I read 2 of his books, and he said, I'm not doing podcasts for a while because I'm writing a book. And I said, well, let me know when you're ready. And I never heard back. So all of a sudden I saw him on your podcast and I went, oh, holy shit, he must be doing podcasts again. So I listened to your podcast with him, which, I enjoyed, but it was, because I'd read a couple of his books, it was like revisiting those concepts. But it's nice to hear his voice, and pick up his vibration.
Yeah, he doesn't do his own narration on Audible. So it was great to get to actually hear, the man behind it. Yeah, just an excellent, excellent episode. What a beautiful human that guy is. This brings us to 371, Dr. Alexis Cowan. Now, Alexis Cowan is a PhD from Princeton. She, after, she, after listening to the Tetragrammaton podcast with Jack Cruz and Andrew Huberman, where Cruz basically lays out his life story in front of Huberman and more or less tells Huberman where the ivory tower of Stanford and all these major institutions have gone wrong. That really was her catalyst to take a deep dive into his stuff and start to unpack quantum biology from, Gerald H. Pollack's work on water, which you're well aware of, and a lot of the stuff on light. And she was incredible. We did 90 minutes, and she basically gave me the episode I was hoping to get from Jack Cruz. So all the detail, everything I was looking for. She's got a fantastic Instagram as well. And in that Instagram, she's got charts and graphs. So one of the first things people will say is, yeah, but I burn easily. Or yeah, what about skin cancer? And so one of her charts shows 0.3% of all cancers is melanoma. 0.3% of all cancer is melanoma. Sunlight,
just a bunch of hype.
Sunlight, we know from these studies, can cure 70% of cancers.
Wow.
So weigh those two options. 0.3% is melanoma, or you cure 70% of cancers with sunlight. It just blew my mind. One of the things that they both really talked about Dr. Cowan and Dr. Cruz, is that we build a sun callus the more often we're out. And if you don't overdo it, this as a strength conditioning coach for all the elite athletes that ever walked the planet Earth, you don't say, I'm going to squat 1,000 pounds, then walk up to it cold and try to do that. You got to work your way up to that. And you damn sure be better repping in the 900s before you try 1,000 pounds. Same thing goes for sunlight. If you're pale as a ghost, you don't want to just run outside in the middle of summer and say, all right, let's get tan. That might kick your ass. But to their point, you can build that sun callus. And it's pretty remarkable because Cruz is, he's Fitzpatrick level 1. He's as white as he gets. He's got a lot of freckles. He lives in El Salvador near the equator, 5,000 feet up elevation on a volcano. So you're getting more UV the higher you go in elevation, and he doesn't burn. He's got a hell of a tan to his credit. That he really is backing that up, right? And I think there's other things he ought to back up, a six-pack, some other things if you really have all your nuts in a row. But beyond that, I think that proves a pretty good point when it comes to this, is that, that consistent exposure where you slowly and gradually increase is attainable for literally anyone on the planet. And he's proved that by living close to the equator, having the ancestry that he does. But yeah, there was many, many great things in that podcast with Dr. Alexis Cowan. She's got a great mind. She's mixed. Her father was African-American. Her mother's from Sweden. So, she's kind of got, both sides of the coin, equatorial and polar, and has some really cool insights when it comes to sunlight.
Kyle, fantastic. I'm excited to hear the rest of them. And for those of you that are not podcast members, you're welcome to go to paulchek.com. And for a very small fee, you can get the extended play for about the price of a cup and a half of Starbucks coffee. You can get hours of additional education on my podcast every month as a member. So paulchek.com. Thank you to all the sponsors for your great products. Thanks to all of you for anything you buy from the sponsor. It supports the podcast, supports my sponsors who are all doing their best to make the world a healthier place and supporting regenerative agriculture and organic and biodynamic farming. And thanks to all of you for listening. I hope you enjoyed what Kyle and I shared and that you took a lot of these things deep into your heart for obvious reasons. And for those of you that are members, continue. We're going to cover a few more podcasts with Kyle, and I'm excited to hear more from Kyle's wisdom keepers and share them all with you. Lots of love. Look forward to sharing something exciting with you next week. Aho, Great Spirit. It is done. It is done. It is done.
Thank you for listening to Spirit Gym with Paul Chek and today's guest, Kyle Kingsbury. If you'd like to continue listening to the conversation, you can join Paul's Spirit Gym podcast membership. When you subscribe, you'll get access to exclusive extended episodes of Spirit Gym with Paul Chek, members-only Q&A opportunities with Paul, access to the podcast members forum within the Spirit Gym community where you can interact with other passionate listeners, and the chance to purchase exclusive Spirit Gym merchandise. Your support helps keep the show running and allows us to bring you even better content. So if you're ready to dive deep and unlock all these amazing extras, head over to paulchek.com/podcast and become a Spirit Gym podcast member today. You can find Kyle online at kingsbu.com. That's KINGSBU.com. And you can connect with him on Instagram at Kyle Kingsbu and on X at Kingsbu. Listen to his podcast, The Kyle Kingsbury Podcast, on your favorite podcast channel or on YouTube at Kyle Kingsbury Podcast. You can find out more about the Gardeners of Eden at gardenersofeden.earth and the upcoming Fit for Service courses and summits at fitforservice.com. For more of the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit the show notes page at paulchek.com/podcast, where you can also find details on the special offers from our premier sponsors, Biooptimizers, Paleo Valley, Wild Pastures, and Organifi, as well as links to Paul's social media, his YouTube channels, and his blog. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please consider leaving us a 5-star rating and a warm review on the podcast platform of your choice. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, and YouTube.